We are live on YouTube. Hello to everybody that's watching. We're live on YouTube and also live on Zoom as well. Welcome into the Ask an Expert hour here on. I almost said Tailscale TV. That's forward projection right there. I'm joined by Jay Stapleton today, who is one of our solutions engineers. Hey Jay, how are you?
Just peachy.
Just peachy.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna affectionately shoot the. Well, I can't say that other one. We're
Mhm.
just going to shoot the breeze, I suppose, is what I can
Yeah.
say for the next few minutes, whilst we wait for people to roll in and figure out that we're actually live and all that good stuff. So,
Mhm.
I know, I know that you are in the midst of switching out phones at the minute, though, because I've just done my iPhone data transfer.
Yeah.
You're a Graphene OS chap, though. I just discovered.
Yeah. I'm running Graphene OS on my Pixel 7 or Pixel 7 Pro with the fancy lenticular Tailscale sticker on the back.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, nice.
and I'm going
Few
in.
comments asking how people get those. Thanks, Jay.
Yes. Come visit us at a conference, and hopefully we still have some left. Uh,
Yeah,
I'm going in today to pre-order the Pixel 10 Pro Fold. One of our colleagues, James, has the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, and I was playing with it at an offsite, and I could get into this a little more screen real estate for my old eyes.
oh yeah,
It's
yeah,
hard going from my three large monitors to this tiny little screen.
yeah. Particularly if you ever need to bring up a terminal client or anything like that to do any, dare I say, real work. You know what I mean, right? Where
Yeah.
where you want to type weird characters and symbols and like on a keyboard, that muscle memory, fast, but on a
I
phone screen,
I've got a little Bluetooth keyboard that I keep in my go bag. So if I'm traveling and I only have my phone, I've definitely been known to SSH over Tailscale, of course, into my infrastructure so I can do things like reset a frozen Postgres or restart an Apache 2 somewhere.
atta boy. That's the way to do it.
Mhm.
I remember, so that this is like an ancient history Tailscale story that I don't know if I've told on the channel, but my very first conference with Tailscale as a developer relations person was DevOps Days Chicago back in, I guess, 2023 or so. And, me being cocksure, knowing full well what SSH was, I was like, oh yeah, I don't really understand what Tailscale SSH like adds. I don't really get what it brings to the picture. And Jeremy, I don't know if you remember Jeremy back then.
Mhm.
Said to me, yeah, but you don't need to manage SSH keys anymore. And I'm like, yeah, but then I have to use Tailscale SSH host name, and my muscle memory just uses SSH host name. And he was like, just try it. Just try it. My mind that day, I was like, oh, so the Tailscale SSH listener on the remote node is like intercepting traffic as long as the packets traverse the tailnet to get to the destination. You mean I don't have to worry about SSH keys anymore? Like my mind that day was blown. And of course you can just do it straight from a phone as well. So if you're on a specific tailnet on your phone,
Mhm.
that's a great use case for not having to worry about authentication.
Being a longtime Linux nerd and having been a Linux admin for decades, Tailscale SSH is probably my favorite part of the product.
I
Like we
use
do
it
so many things, but
so much.
like it has been my job to go around to every production machine and make sure that the pre-shared keys for people who have left the company are cleaned up. And I gotta say, the first time I did that at one role, there were things that had been in there for 5+ years of people that no longer existed in the organization. And that's just
Yeah.
a scary place to be.
And then that sort of led me to think about, well, shoot, now I can access anything over my telnet. And then
Yeah.
we proceeded to discuss ACLs on how they can sort of lock things down for you if you need them to. But
Hmm.
anyway, I think we are probably what 5 minutes in now. So hello, if you're watching. Some ground rules and little explanation of what we're doing here today. Jay and I are going to sit here and take your questions about Tailscale and try our very best to answer them in real time if we can. If you want to ask us a question, please use the YouTube live chat. We've also got on our brand new Discord server, discord.gg/tailscale. There is an in the comments room, which I have open on my screen and I'll be keeping a look at as well. There's also a third place you can put questions and comments in the Zoom chat. So if you're joining us through Zoom, hello, please use the Q&A feature on Zoom so that our producer Rob can put the questions into a doc that Jay and I can both see. Very much appreciate that. Now, before we get started too much further into the main format of of today's show, um, you have been busy tail scaling up the retro gaming console to end all retro gaming consoles. Am I right?
I I I really like retro gaming, NES games, old DOS games. I'm a sucker for Commander Keen. I found an old 286 laptop that was fried, and so I replaced the screen with the LCD from an old iPad. It's now got a Raspberry Pi 5 in there with an NVMe hat. And I've done other projects in the past around retro gaming, like this one here, which is just a Raspberry Pi uh, the Nano W, and this is missing its controller right now, but I'm now setting these all back up and using Tailscale to sync my saved game data so I could be playing Final Fantasy on the laptop, and then when it's time to move to a smaller screen, continue my game on these mobile devices. So Alex has threatened to do a full video about this in the future, so maybe we'll go into more depth on it.
I think the audience needs to see it. To be honest, you were describing to me in our sort of pre-show everything all about these devices, and I was like, hold up, you're using an old iPad screen, or you're using a Raspberry Pi 5 to drive an old iPad screen.
Yeah.
First of all, that's amazing because there's just this little hardware board that is like a display driver for the iPad. So
Yeah.
where did you pull the screen yourself out of the old iPad? Was it hard?
Yeah, in a previous life, I did a lot of iPod repairs when I worked in a small mom and pop computer shop. And a lot of laptop repairs. So I'm pretty comfortable taking things apart and doing like component level soldering where needed. No soldering needed on this though. I just bought a board from eBay that plugged right into it and has a HDMI port on it. So,
And there's
but
nothing more to it. It's
yeah,
yeah. Rohit or D Rohit in the chat says Home Lab is about recycling jank and making it work.
exactly.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Absolutely. Well, we will do, I think, a dedicated video on that in the future. If you'd like to see that, please leave a thumbs up emoji in the YouTube chat or something like that to give us an idea of how much you'd like to see Jay's retro gaming console empire broken down on the Tailscale YouTube channel. I mean, we do have to bring it back to Tailscale at some point, though. Where's the Tailscale piece in all of this?
I'm using Tailscale to sync my saved games between all the devices. I'm on a Final Fantasy kick right now, which is not the fastest games to solve. I've been going through Final Fantasy 1 for a few weeks now, and I can play on the laptop for a while and then switch to this when I want to move to the couch and just pick up the game where I left off.
That's really cool. So how are you syncing? Like, what's the software underneath to sync the saves?
rsync. Yeah.
Oh, sophisticated
Yeah.
as that, huh? Via
Like I
SSH, I
said, I'm
assume.
a Linux admin from years back. If I can use rsync for anything, I'll do that. So, but I can take this traveling, whereas packing the giant 286 looking laptop might raise some eyebrows in certain airports. Uh, this is a little more convenient.
I think my first ever computer was a 286 my dad rescued out of a skip at work.
Nice.
It had I think my second one had a 4 GB hard drive because I remember playing Monster Truck Madness on that thing back in the day. And I don't remember what the first one has, but I do remember the CPU is a 286 and it ran Windows 3.1, 3.11 or whatever it was.
Hmm.
I used to play Lemmings until the sun went down.
It was a great game. I've got Lemmings on that box back there. So I see we've got some questions trickling in now that we've gone completely off the rails here. Uh,
Yeah, a little bit.
I I actually didn't know the answer to this first question before we started, but because the person submitted it just before we went live, had time to get an answer from one of our engineers. And somebody asked, I've noticed that Magic DNS seems to always prefer IPv4. Is there a way to prefer IPv6 instead? And there is, it's a node attr or node attribute that you can add to your policy file with a target of star and an attr of magic DNS dash AAAA. I don't believe this is documented anywhere, but now you've heard it. We'll post that somewhere where you don't have to rely on my narration to type it back out. So if this, I believe this came in on a YouTube comment, and maybe our intrepid producer could copy and paste it into into a reply there. But if not, I'll do that after the call.
It's I'd never really considered that as being it's not even a problem. But like
Mhm.
I personally, my mental model of networks is I just don't really I have never really grokked IPv6. Every time I've tried to, I end up in this horrible loop of watching 1,000 YouTube videos and still understanding nothing by the time I get to the end of it. So um, it's a great question. I didn't even
Mhm.
know that you could do that with a node attribute. So thanks for sharing that, Jim.
Yeah, me neither. And actually, the engineer who answered, Klaus from our Eng team, said that he noticed that we had it in one of our corporate environments and tried it out and found out what it did. So it's so undocumented that not even our whole engineering team knew about it.
Now, there's a question here come in asking, are there any plans to add, I assume, DERP servers or any kind of Tailscale servers in Latin America? Colombia apparently is getting a pretty beefy bandwidth upgrade soon.
Yeah. So I can't speak for the DERP team, but we are constantly keeping an eye on traffic and where we gather metrics about the latency that people are experiencing. But whenever it comes down to talking about DERP servers and prioritizing DERP servers, there's a couple of things that I will always go back to, and that is we try not to use a DERP server. So most of the time, we can orchestrate something to get you a direct connection. And for those cases where DERP servers currently are going to be required, maybe you're behind a double NAT uh, or you're behind something that blocks all UDP. We have a new feature that is landing. It either just came out or is just about to, called Peer Relay. And I think Alex and I are going to be doing a bigger talk about this in the not too distant future, where a machine where you can get direct connections that is proximal to the machine where you can't is going to be able to lily pad those for you. Uh, so I think
What
that
does what does lily padding mean for those of
I,
us that
I'm
aren't
picturing
familiar?
a frog jumping across a pond sort of thing. It gives you an extra hop in your path, but without having to deal with the QoS or in this case the distance to the nearest DERP server.
Because the speed of light is only so fast after all.
Yeah, it's convenient, but who do you talk to about that?
Yeah, that was funnier than it should have been. Um, yeah, because I realized the other day that pinging Seattle from here, I mean, I'm in Raleigh on the East Coast. Pinging Seattle for me takes just about as long as it takes to ping London, which makes sense given the fact that they're both
Mhm.
6, 7 hour flights away from here. So look how American I've become, measuring distance in hours instead of actual units.
Canadians do that as well.
Yeah.
I'm from Thunder Bay, which is 7 hours from anywhere. Uh,
Thunder Bay,
oh, you
eh?
betcha.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. Should we bring it back to topic for a second?
Sure. I got somebody
Um,
saying, I'm interested in switching from WireGuard to Tailscale. Do I still need to port forward like WireGuard? Probably not. One of the little bits of magic baked into the Tailscale client is NAT traversal. And as I was hinting at earlier, there are some cases where that NAT traversal won't work, like if you're on a network that blocks UDP or if you're behind a double NAT situation. But in those cases, rather than failing, we fall back to a relayed connection where your machines are still talking to each other. They're just bouncing off of one of our DERP servers. And the DERP servers don't terminate the WireGuard tunnels, so they never see your traffic. They act basically like another internet router, just shuttling those WireGuard frames.
I've had a question. We'll come back. We'll come back to the port forwarding WireGuard thing in a minute. But there's an important question just come through in our internal Slack from
Okay.
Natasha, our community manager, who says, "I want to know what that screen behind Jay is doing." Now, Natasha, we can tell you are late because we covered this at the beginning. But anyway,
Yes.
Jay.
So I leave my retro gaming laptop basically just running either Tetris or Dr. Mario on demo loops because those are the most visually interesting without being too distracting. I'm a solutions engineer, so I talk to customers pretty much all day. And the nature of our customers tends to break towards the nerdy. Uh, and so a lot of people get a kick out of this. I have a conversation about it at least once a day
Yeah,
of somebody being like, I used to have that laptop.
the old Zoom backdrop game is strong with this one.
Hmm.
So to come back to the port forwarding discussion about Tailscale and WireGuard, do I need to do port forwarding with Tailscale? I'm going to underscore everything Jay said and be like, yes, and the entire magic of Tailscale for me is that it no longer really matters where your infrastructure is. So what do I mean by that? So let's say I have a Raspberry Pi sat on this table in front of me, and I want to connect to it with my with my laptop, right?
Hmm.
My laptop by design is of course a portable little device. So I take my laptop to the coffee shop and I think, oh shoot, I want to SSH, I want to be able to control or do something, turn the lights off from my Raspberry Pi or whatever it is I'm doing with my Pi. With Tailscale, it does what's called NAT traversal, and it kind of figures out a way to abuse. I don't mean to use the word abuse, but it kind of does abuse the way that stateful firewalls work. So without getting too much into the weeds of how that whole handshake occurs, an outbound packet goes outbound through a firewall, and that state is recorded somewhere in a table on the outbound firewall. It then hits the inbound firewall, and the inbound firewall's like, no, I'm not going to let you in. But the Raspberry Pi on the other end then sends a discovery packet out because it's talking to the Tailscale coordination server, which has then been part of that triangle of discovery. We can then use those stateful inbound and outbound exchanges to establish a direct connection between those two devices. And it's a very complicated thing to try and explain with words. So if you're curious to learn more, we'll put a link in the all the various chats we have to a fantastic blog post explaining how Tailscale's NAT traversal actually works, not Alex's butchered explanation of it, on our blog. A chap called Dave Anderson, one of our engineers, wrote a post 3, 4 years ago now on how NAT traversal works, and it was one. I read it on my first week at Tailscale, and my mind was just like, it can't possibly be so simple. Like it was one of those things that when someone explains it, you're like, oh, state. I've heard the phrase stateful firewalls my entire career. I didn't really understand what they meant.
Yeah, and I just love the way that Dave Anderson lays out technical topics. He's done a few of these blog posts. He did a great one when he installed Tailscale on his robot vacuum, uh, cheekily called Tailscale Sucks. I also recommend that one because it's just a lot of fun. And Dave has a great way of presenting really technical topics in a really accessible ways. So,
What's interesting about that one is a lot of the Xiaomi and Roborock vacuums are actually just running Ubuntu underneath. And
mhm.
so if you there's an open source firmware out there for those robots called Valetudo, And essentially it works as like a man. You spin up this man in the middle update server on your network, and then when the robot tries to phone home to get a firmware update, it actually goes through that server on your network, pulls down a patched firmware file that's rooted, and then suddenly you have root access to the Ubuntu system underneath, which means you can then install Tailscale on it because it's just Ubuntu at the end of the day.
Hmm.
Um, Love that. So, anyway, I see a question come through about TSIDP. Of course, we just did a video this week on Tailscale Identity Provider, TSIDP, saying, are there any more videos coming on this topic soon? Yes, soon-ish, maybe. The 1.0 release is coming at some point before the end of the year, and you can rest assured that there will be a video talking about identity and Tailscale's ambitions for becoming a platform for identity and lots of other things besides, by the way, at some point before the end of the year. So, yes, but I don't know when exactly.
Yeah. I saw somebody just submitted a comment, and being as I'm a solutions engineer and therefore report up the chain to the sales team, I should call this out and say that somebody mentioned they just found out that Tailscale can bill via the AWS marketplace, and that helped them get around some billing issues. And that is definitely an option if you are on one of our paid plans to go through the AWS or the Azure marketplaces for billing. So talk to your sales rep. Maybe you'll get to talk to me too.
What is the best way folks can get in touch with the sales team, Jay?
Sales at tailscale.com is a great way. If you're not already working with a specific salesperson, that will get you routed to whoever's next at bat.
And you mentioned the AWS billing portion. Obviously, that's one way. You know, you can directly integrate your Tailscale. You can just go to the AWS marketplace, click the Tailscale button, and it will just go straight through your Amazon billing cycles that way. Are there any other things we do with cloud providers? A genuine question, I don't know, but like
Mhm.
we have a Tailscale billing, we have an AWS billing. Are there any others?
We also have, not direct with the cloud providers. Like we've done a few events with like AWS around marketing and whatnot, but from my side of the house, we have some like Terraform code, some Pulumi code that is examples of how to say spin up an auto-scaling group subnet router in AWS, and we've got those in our Tailscale dev GitHub repo. Uh, and these are things that myself or some of my colleagues have put together that we've helped customers find a solution for something that they're working on. And then we publish that there so that they're more widely available. So if you're having a problem that's an AWS infrastructure problem, chances are you're not the first person to do that. Tailscale has millions of tailnets now, and a lot of people doing some truly bizarre things with the software, which I love to see every time. And so,
What's the most bizarre thing you've seen somebody do with Tailscale?
uh, there was somebody I was talking to who was saying they were going to install us on a satellite for communication, which was pretty cool. Um, my favorite go-to, though, is we're on a fleet of refrigerated trucks that need to send telemetry around food safety information, like temperature logs, back to central servers on a regular basis. They use spotty Wi-Fi and 3G modems because this fleet is older than the new tech. And the stability of the network is always a problem. And having the tunnel maintain a connection, even when the underlying network is going through chaos, means that they don't have to think about it anymore. It just works.
Yeah. So you remember where I was talking about the NAT traversal earlier? I pick my laptop up and go to the coffee shop, and I can suddenly reach the Raspberry Pi on my desk. Well, this does translate to some really interesting and quite esoteric business use cases. I remember this must have been 7 years ago. I went to the control room of a US freight company that have trucks, just thousands. You've seen them. I won't name them, but you've seen their trucks on the road. I promise you, in the States. And they had this giant control room with this huge screen on the wall, there were no roads marked on this map. It was just an empty like silhouette of the United States. But you could tell where the interstates were just from the lines of the dots of where their trucks were and stuff. And there was, a few stragglers out in the middle of nowhere doing pickups or whatever.
Hmm.
I just wondered back then, like, how do they securely connect all these devices back to home base? And they had this complicated setup of like bouncing through a cloud service, and then that cloud service was allowed in through their front door to their on-premise data center, and it was just this whole complicated web of stuff to go wrong. But with Tailscale, you install the client in the truck, and then it can just reach back home without any of that mess.
Yeah, and the solution that one of our companies that we work with had in place before they moved to Tailscale was they opened a port to the world and had a saved password on all of the devices.
Yes,
And it was the same password on all of the devices. So,
that's about as bad as sticking a post-it note to the bottom of your monitor, to be honest.
yeah.
Maybe worse.
So, yeah.
CLX in the chat writes on YouTube, I'd love to see a Tailscale showcase. Like, I find it really inspiring to see how others use Tailscale. Maybe, Jay, this is an idea for a future, like, regular segment in the podcast that you and I are threatening to do with increasing frequency, that we should do like a Tailscale showcase
Yeah.
segment.
I mean, I need to get permission from my customers before I go into too much detail, but I've been working with a company for a few months now that does like QA work. And so they do a lot of automated testing, and they're really baking Tailscale directly into their product in a really cool way. And it's something that I get really excited about because I'm a giant nerd, but there's also things that probably have a broader appeal.
Yeah.
And being able to talk to those would be uh, would be pretty great. So I should start putting a list together. Uh, I see somebody posted a question here that I think I know what's going on. They said, "How did my user lose a tag that was applied? Thought I had an issue with my Mac and spent hours trying to figure out what was broken until I found it." Tags in Tailscale are a bit different than the same word in a different context. A tag is part of our identity model. So when you tag a device, it is no longer associated with the user account that it was initially logged in as. So I recommend my customers tag shared devices, infrastructure devices, things that you don't want tied to a person. You know, if Alex is our IT guy and sets up our entire infrastructure and it's all logged in as Alex, then he wins the lottery next week and goes off and to Tahiti. When we deactivate his account, all of his devices go away. So we don't want that for infrastructure devices. So we use tags. A side effect of that is if you tag a user's device, it's not their device anymore. It is a tagged device. And if they log back in, it's their device again. It is no longer a tagged device. So if you want a way to collectively refer to a group of users' devices, you would use a group for that rather than a tag. And it's a semantic difference that is specific to our context, but important as you start getting into the nuts and bolts and the more complex bits of your policy file.
Have you ever wondered why in your Tailscale ACLs or grants file it's called tag owners? Well, that's why.
Yeah.
It's because
And
the
whoever's
tag becomes
listed
the owner of the node in terms of the identity that it assumes on the tailnet. Sorry, Jay, go ahead.
almost. The tag owners are the people who are allowed to apply that tag. Admins can apply any tag, but a tag owner uh, can apply a tag even if they're not an administrator.
Confused yet? Yeah, I actually do want to do a video specifically just on tagging. I've got quite a long list of videos to get to, folks. I'm sure you'll appreciate. But one of the videos beyond, the visual policy editor becoming a thing now, hooray! Also is like the nature of like node ownership and tagging and all that kind of stuff, because it is a little complicated when you want to get really granular with it sometimes. Like it's a powerful tool, and if you're wielding a powerful tool, naturally there are consequences. So you want to make sure you've got the all the information to make those decisions moving forward. So get subscribed, like, comment, subscribe, and was it smash that like button? That's the
Smash it.
phrase, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
And keep an eye on the channel for more content about that soon.
I'm going to paraphrase a question here because they're asking something very specific and I'm going to generalize it. They're asking about a way to have certain applications use an exit node, but not everything. And this may be useful in the case of geo shifting, or it may be useful in the case of, say, a SaaS application that does IP allow listing. And rather than use an exit node for that, this is where you could have an app connector where you route by FQDN. And if you have a specific service that needs to come from a known IP address, you would list that service in the app connector, and then any request to, you know, I believe we use this internally for our Grafana server. So you have to be logged into the Tailscale network to hit our Grafana tenant, and it just transparently gets routed whenever I type in grafana.com, and I don't see that happening. So for the person who asked a very specific question about an app being routed differently than the rest of the apps. Not so much an app, but an FQDN, and that is a generalized solution.
Yeah. Split DNS is what you're referring to there, Jay, I think. The question I think is hoping for some kind of split tunneling on like
Mhm.
the device layer, which we don't support as far as I'm aware. Um,
Right. Yeah, we can't assign a tunnel per app, but the app that they mentioned specifically would have a set of URLs. So
yeah.
having an app connector handle those URLs would be the way to do it.
Now, there was a question came in about running Tailscale on an old version of macOS. I'm afraid I've lost the question on my screen here, but I have the answer. So as of Tailscale 1.44, which came out in June 2023, so over 2 years ago at this point, Tailscale dropped support for, well, Go, more importantly, actually dropped support for older versions of macOS. So it is a Tailscale limitation in so much as that we are an app written in Go, but the actual underlying reason as to why we don't support older versions like OS 10 versions of macOS these days is simply because Go itself doesn't support old versions of macOS.
Mhm. All right. Oh, I found that. I'm going to cross that off the list. Had somebody ask if we use Nix internally or just Docker. I know many of our engineers will use Nix, and a couple of them are even nerdier than me and will use Nix OS. Uh, I'm here on a Pop OS uh, machine that I'm talking to you on now, which the real Linux nerds think that's almost Windows, but I really enjoy it. I don't have to fight my OS on a daily basis, but I still have all the tools I need.
There's a beautiful halfway house too. Like, I mean, I do a lot of video stuff in my job. And so I'm constantly using things like Final Cut and Adobe and a bunch of other tools that just aren't available on the Linux desktop. I have a framework over there which I use when I'm doing the straight up development work, but which has got what's it called? Omarchi on it at the moment. Which I love Omarchi, by the way. It's a real. I'm having a real good time with that. But I use Nix Darwin on my Macs to configure everything and Home Manager to import everything. And if you want to look at my Nix config, if you want to, it's on GitHub at Ironic Badger Nix config. So everything is out in the open. You can go and tell me what I did wrong with Nix. I probably did something wrong over there. Yeah, so it's a great tool.
I've got somebody here asking, is there a neat way to control Tailscale ACLs as infrastructure as code, specifically Terraform? And yes,
You are going to tell me about something that you told me about 2 years ago when I first met you.
really.
Yeah,
Did I tell you
you were
about
the
our
first one to tell
Terraform?
me about this at
Yeah.
Tailscale. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a Terraform provider, and you can use it to manage your ACLs directly. I think our Tailscale-dev GitHub repo has some example code there, but if not, the Terraform operator docs definitely will dig directly into that. So you can really manage your network as code alongside the rest of your infrastructure as code and have a single source of truth for how things should look.
What is GitOps for those that aren't familiar?
Uh, so the I was talking about the Terraform operator, but GitOps is another way of operating your ACL as infrastructure as code. Um, we have a runner that that is in GitHub that you can check in your ACL as a text file, just like you would any other Git repo, and it will run through, validate the ACLs, and then post them up via the API. And that way you can use Git as uh, your single source of truth for what the policy files should look like, but also have your versioning take advantage of code owners to make sure that any changes are approved by somebody who ought to be able to push that button and the ability to roll things back fairly quickly too.
Yeah, it's really important, I think, less so in a personal scenario, but where you've got a team involved or multiple departments or anything like that, where you need to. I mean, we have audit logging built into every operation that gets put through the Tailscale admin console, so you can
Hmm.
see it's like a Git diff almost. If you manually modify the Tailscale grants file, the policy file, you will that will be recorded somewhere, that'll be logged somewhere, and auditors can go and view that and point the finger if they need to, um, in a problem case. But the GitOps thing just moves that, I suppose, that moment, or even that ability. It moves that ability to manually modify the policy file out of the Tailscale admin console and into source control somewhere. And then you have your whole CI/CD pipeline that goes through and GitOps style applies those changes.
Hmm. You mentioned the audit logging. Another great feature for production environments, especially, is if you look at a change to the policy file in the audit log, it will have a revert button on the bottom of it. So if you pushed a change and it caused some problems, click on logs, find that entry, and just hit revert, and it will undo those changes very quickly. Uh, I have pointed that out to most of my customers as we're going through the features and how to use Tailscale in production. And I have had a couple of people message me, months or years down the road and say, "Hey, remember when you told me about that revert button? It saved my bacon today because I could undo a change in 30 seconds instead of trying to figure out exactly which part of the file I changed caused the problem while we were in an outage."
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Now, you are a Linux user, right? So that must mean that you're familiar with the pain of resolve.conf and network manager fighting each other. Are you able to talk us through uh, how one gets precedent over the other and what our users could do about
Pain, I think you mean the joy of
that? Yes.
watching, yeah, watching the little robots struggle. You know, I don't get into the weeds of managing DNS anymore. This is one of the things I haven't done in years because I use Tailscale everywhere and just use MagicDNS. And uh, for quite a while, I used NextDNS as my primary resolver. And then I had a Pi-hole for a while. Now I'm using Control D just to try that out for a bit. And I hit the override local DNS switch, and every machine is logged into Tailscale and has the DNS handled. Uh, if you have a more complex DNS environment, specifically if you have Active Directory, there are a few steps that you can take. But on Linux, I I have one machine that I do, you can say accept DNS equals false as a flag to Tailscale set or Tailscale up. And you can then go back to using your systemd resolve D to manage things as normal. And how I normally do that is I just keep the symlink in place, so everything that touches uh, etc resolve conf ends up going to the right file to be read in by systemd resolved.
There's a comment from CLX in the chat as well saying that we have a comprehensive support document walking users through issues with resolve.conf,
Great.
um, and that they followed the steps in there and it's fixed all their issues. So, would this be Alex's polite way of saying RTFM? I hope not, but that's kind of what I'm saying, isn't
This is a polite company, so you can just say RTM.
it? Oh, I forgot. Yes, it is a Canadian company, isn't it?
Uh,
Yes.
I have somebody here asking about a direct connection to double NAT. How does it work? It doesn't. So our NAT traversal magic really is, and if you read Dave Anderson's excellent blog post on it, you get a lot more detail than either Alex or I can muddle through. But uh, it really does work with the nature of stateful firewalls and the sort of default behavior of most of them to trick the firewall into letting it establish a direct connection. With double NAT, we aren't able to do that because each end of that connection is talking to a different next hop. So double NAT connections are pretty much always uh, going to fall back to a DERP server. They're going to be relayed connections unless both ends have IPv6. Uh, a lot of places now that only offer double NAT connections will also give you a routable IPv6 address, in which case there is no NAT and everything just works.
Everything just works. Yes. That's been my experience with IPv6. Yep, everything just works.
Right. Yeah. I mean, IPv6 has been around for 35 years now, so it's like any day now. It's just it's like Linux on the desktop. It's always
It's the
going to be
year
next
of
to
the
you.
Linux desktop and IPv6. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's going to be the running joke before long. All right, so I have a question here for, well, maybe both of us. Any way or plans to enable or install Tailscale on a RISC-V device?
I saw that question and I asked uh, in our questions channel in our Slack, and we ship binaries for it. If you go to packages, that's pkgs.tailscale.com/stable. There is a RISC-V 64 package available right there. So
Oh
uh,
yeah, look at that. Today I
thank
learned,
you,
huh?
Irissa from our support team for finding that out in real time for us.
I'm curious to know, whoever asked that question, what's the RISC-V device that you're using? Let us know in the comments.
Is it the framework? Because I was this close when I was building out this machine. I'm like, I could put a framework motherboard in there instead of a Raspberry Pi. Like I use Raspberry Pis for everything. This could be a little more exciting. And like the framework RISC-V motherboard is quite reasonably priced for what you get.
Mhm.
Uh, but I uh, I went with what I had on hand anyhow. So
All right, there's a question here from Sudhir. Is it a good idea to use headscale or tailscale to expose a local service on a client's computer so it can reach our automation platform? Follow-up question. What's the automation platform? Out of interest.
yeah. Uh, I mean, either will work. You know, it depends on how many clients that you're using. I will, of course, I work a lot with customers who do this with Tailscale. Headscale is, for those who don't know, was an open source re-implementation of the Tailscale control plane. So it is not an official Tailscale product, but we do work closely with the people who built that out. In fact, one of them we ended up hiring, and he still manages Headscale, but works for Tailscale. Uh, so we're very cognizant to not break it, but we don't support it directly. But we do have a number of customers who operate equipment in their customers' environments. And I would say that if you're doing this widely, uh, a big thing to keep in mind is the tests section of your policy file. You want to make sure that under no conditions can customer A ever see customer B's device. And so setting a test, which gives you these end state conditions, uh, means that if you accidentally put in a too permissive policy, it won't let you save that because it violates the tests in place. So if you're working in a live environment in customer environments like secondary users, I'd say always use unit tests on your policy file.
I have nothing to add. I've nothing further, Your Honor. That was great. Thanks, Jay. There's
Mhm.
some chat in the YouTube comments talking about the automation platform was N8N in this example.
Mhm.
Such a great application. I think Christian Lemper's literally just put out a video today talking about N8N. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but um, I was messing about with N8N a couple of months ago, just connecting. It's basically like Node-RED and if this then that had a baby, and out came N8N in the middle as this beautiful self-hostable kind of automation platform of just click and join boxes together with lines and it will do stuff. It's really fun. I want to do a video on it, but I just haven't quite figured out what the angle is yet, you know?
Yeah. Uh, Got a question here on AWS, who was somebody had a subnet router in AWS to connect to private subnets, but the DNS wasn't working because these are behind a subnet router, and they were asking if there's a way to translate DNS names from the subnet. And what I generally do in AWS specifically is your Route 53 resolver, which is the native DNS system for AWS on whatever your private IP CIDR is for that subnet, dot two is going to be the Route 53 resolver. So you can set that up as a split DNS entry for a subset of your devices in Tailscale and use the subnet router to reach the Route 53 on 10.0.0.2 or 172 dot whatever dot 2. Uh, and that should just work.
Okay, there was a question came through from Bedar. I'm sorry. Are you guys working with UniFi to bring Tailscale to the UniFi ecosystem? I'm aware of a Git repo, an unofficial one that we can use, but I want something official.
Uh, I don't know of any conversations happening with UniFi. If that were happening, that would probably be going through David Carney, who's one of our founders who works on strategic projects. I think that'd be pretty cool to have Tailscale running on Unify devices. So if you know anybody at Unify, maybe have them
Right.
call.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I should have a long time loyalty customer discount from UniFi because literally my entire house is stuffed to the gunnels with UniFi gear. There's a switch there, there's a switch there, there's another one in the rack over there. It's ridiculous. And I, for the longest time, didn't run a UniFi firewall because I couldn't run Tailscale on the firewall.
Hmm.
So I stuck with OpenSense for a very long time because of that. In the end, I got cajoled by a friend of mine into buying, was it UDM Fiber Gateway Cloud Max Pro XG PoE 24 or whatever they called it. I don't know. And the only thing wrong with it in my mind is that it doesn't run Tailscale officially. Like you can, there are repos as we alluded to where you can do that unofficially. So believe me when I say you are not alone, including Tailscalers, in wanting this feature.
Mhm.
We just don't have it yet.
I don't use my edge device as anything other than a router, really. And I actually have a GL.iNet barrel, which we just had a blog post go out about a couple days ago. Uh, and that is inside my network and partitions off part of my network, but also runs Tailscale natively. So for anything like my Kobo, if I want to sync it over Tailscale, it can do that with a reverse subnet router on the
Mhm.
barrel. So I can download my books when I'm on the road because the barrel comes with me.
Yeah, I've used those GL.iNet devices myself quite a few times, and they are so handy. I know we're digressing from UniFi a little bit here, but
Yeah.
we went to the beach over the summer, and the hotel we had charged by the device for Wi-Fi. I don't know what decade they think it is, but anyway, so I connected my GL.iNet slate to the Wi-Fi as the one device that I was going to pay for, and then everything else that was sat behind the router, the hotel had no idea I had five devices connected. It was great.
Yeah. And one thing I've noticed a lot because I travel a fair bit with work, going to conferences and whatnot. A lot of hotels now aren't using WPA for their Wi-Fi anymore. So there's no encryption there. So having something where you can route all of your traffic through an exit node means that your nerdy neighbor won't be snooping on what IP addresses you happen to be connecting to. Uh, See another question in here about, is there a way to use Proton and Tailscale at the same time? And maybe you may be able to plumb it up with custom IP tables rules. It's not a supported configuration, and that is why we have an integration with Mullvad. Mullvad is another privacy VPN. They are a company that aligns well with us, both technologically and I don't know, ideologically. So we've set up a relationship there where you can buy a Mullvad subscription through Tailscale and have exit nodes available to you from the Mullvad network. Uh, so if you want to be able to use that privacy VPN and Tailscale at the same time, that would be the supported mechanism to do that.
Now, Ryan Housen comes in with a question that I wish I had a better answer for. Is there a way to get ESP32 devices connected directly to my tailnet? I think the answer is no, but I wanted to ask anyway.
This is my new toy I just picked up. It's a ESP32 e-paper. I haven't
Cool.
really dug into it yet. The answer is no. But it would be nice. I know some people have written like third-party WireGuard to Tailscale bridges. Uh, you could do that in a containerized environment. That is kind of a hacky way of approaching it, which means I love it, but I don't recommend it. Uh,
The
but
other thing you can do, of course, is spin up a subnet router in the same network as the ESP32. I'm sure you knew that already. But so the ESPs in ESP homeland at least can run WireGuard natively, but
Mhm.
they don't have the user space that we need to run and do our thing because it's a compiled firmware, device. It's not running a full operating system, so it doesn't have a proper networking stack that we can kind of hook into. I believe is the technical answer. It was maybe a year ago I asked that question in our Slack internally because that's another thing I want to see. I want to put my because I have a bunch of ESPs at my mum's house, and I'd love to have that data feeding back into my Home Assistant. Just little things for me like checking she's up and about in the morning and stuff like that. It's so at the moment I have a Home Assistant running in her house, and then I have that reach back out over the network, and I can do it that way, but it just feels like an extra hop. You know what I mean?
Mhm. So, short answer, no. Long answer is it could be a fun project,
Short
or
answer, no. Long answer, no.
uh, have somebody here asking about using two separate tailnets, and that is not currently possible, but short answer, no. Long answer, kind of. Uh, one thing that I do if I am testing something out in my lab environment, I still need access to some of our web-based tools that are on our corporate tailnet. I run a second Tailscale D in user space mode and set one of my browser profiles to use it as a SOCKS 5 proxy. Uh, so it can be done, but you really have to draw the rest of the owl yourself, and it is not going to be super intuitive. Like part of what I love about Tailscale is it just works. It's magic, sparkles, pixie dust. It's wonderful. But when you really want to get under the hood and make things work that, maybe shouldn't, there are ways of doing it. So a second Tailscale D running in user space networking mode as a SOCKS 5 proxy tied to a browser to use that proxy can work in that scenario. I don't recommend doing this on your employer's equipment. There may be consequences there, but if this is your machine and you're playing around, that would be the direction I would point you in.
That sounds like the definition of home lab jank to me.
Oh yeah,
A
it's
SOCKS 5
very big.
proxy running in. Yeah.
All right. Now, normally we trail off a little bit and do a bit of a speed run at the end. I actually do have a customer call right at the bottom of the hour. So, Alex, do you want to squeeze in a couple more of these before I
Yeah,
have to
sure.
bounce?
All right, speed round time. I use Tailscale at home, but I have a Raspberry Pi at my daughter's house running AdGuard and Tailscale. I can log on from my house to my daughter's, but how can I log on to the Raspberry Pi so that I can update it?
I would run Tailscale SSH directly on the Raspberry Pi and then SSH to the Tailscale IP or MagicDNS name, and you'll be able to apt update over SSH.
I would love to see Alex show how he would set up multiple ACLs for a home lab situation with multiple services and also some best practices for family and friends. Accessing a tailnet would be awesome. So I assume you're going to talk about node sharing and that kind of thing in that question. Yeah, I'll add it to my backlog.
Yeah, I'd love to
Node
see that
sharing is
too.
one of those videos I've been wanting to make for a long time. What I would say in the interim is my colleague Kevin wrote on the Tailscale blog, and I'll put a link in the chat shortly, about interesting ways to use Tailscale with friends and family. It's a really
Mhm.
great post. Highly recommend it.
Yeah. Uh,
Right, last one. Are there any examples of reverse proxy using TSIDP or similar?
I don't have any. We do have now, before TSIDP existed, there is a Nginx auth proxy that has been around for years now, which will inject a Tailscale identity into HTTP simple auth headers, and it is a plugin for Nginx. Uh, Based on the question, that might be a good fit. I have used that internally for some of my lab things to just log in as my Tailscale identity. Uh, this is before TSIDP existed, so now I'm migrating my things over to TSIDP, but I haven't had to reverse proxy anything uh, in that environment yet, so I haven't tested that out.
Yeah, it would be a really nice feature, wouldn't it, to have some at least basic auth in front of apps that don't natively speak OAuth or OIDC. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's a great idea. And so, in the podcast episode that came out yesterday, where I was talking with David Carney, our co-founder, and Remy Greccio, who's on the strategic projects team about TSIDP. Um, I've got their ear at the minute to talk about TSIDP, so don't worry. I'll feed that idea right back in. I'm sure they're thinking of it already, but
All right, I'm
great
going to
point.
squeeze one more in because it's quick. Is there a straightforward way to tunnel some IPs via my Tailscale subnet router instead of creating app connectors? Yes, you can advertise public IPs on a subnet router. Doesn't have to be private IPs. So if the service you're trying to reach isn't behind a CDN or otherwise being tricky, just put its IP address in there and it will transparently route for you.
There you go. I mean, if you think about it under the covers, that's really all an app connector is doing.
Yeah, it just does it dynamically based on DNS responses.
Absolutely. Well, I think that will probably do us for today. So I want to say a great big thank you to everybody that's watched throughout or even just dipped in and out throughout the hour. We do these things regularly. I have a plug for a Discord event coming up fairly soon. So on October the 7th, I will be doing a live stream on Discord with Remy Greccio from the Strategic Projects team I mentioned earlier. He's directly involved in the development work happening on TSIDP right now. So if you want to know more about TSIDP, join us on October the 7th on our Discord at discord.gg/tailscale. So I guess all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. And until next time, I've been Alex.
And I'm still Jay.
Thanks, Jay. Have a good one.
Bye.